So overall, this gremlin is incredibly useful. Whether you're here for the thighs, the ass, the flat chest, or whatever circumstances may apply, she's an incredibly useful character to have, with even more value now that we have Acheron out. But we're going to discuss her primarily in a mono-quantum oriented team because I feel like that's the place many of you will use her in. First and foremost, this is my E. Before you question any of these stats, keep in mind she only needs about 45 or 46 effect hit rate with that E2. We're going to be discussing an E2 build later on, but for now, I'm going to focus on E1 and maybe E0 because they're relatively the same. Traces, she's maxed out. For Light Cone, it's her signature, and for relics, it is the Quantum Set and Glamoth. You will be following a very similar build path in my opinion if you go for E0 or E1. If you're going for E2, you're going to be using the exact same build basically. So let's discuss. Her primary role in your team would be to add the quantum weakness, and yes, I understand she can add others such as lightning or wind, but quantum is going to be the always guaranteed one in most scenarios. It's at least going to happen once in each team. Because Silver Wolf herself is quantum and she's not like a unknown element, she's going to apply quantum. It's better and has increased rates with more of the same elemental characters, but you can generally get a rough guideline or gauge of how often she's going to apply it depending on how you orient your team. So in this instance, she has a chance of applying wind, lightning, and then quantum. Quantum is taking up far more of that likelihood because there are two quantum characters. But if I exchange somebody like HoYoverse for Bailu in this instance, there's a 50-50 shot between lightning and quantum. In a mono quantum team, it's the only thing she's applying, which is why she's exceptional there. Just keep in mind this is only a single target, so you may want to use it on bosses. For Trace Party, her ultimate, then her skill, then her talent. Her talent is additional bonuses. Her ultimate is the highest def reduction in the game, and then her skill will be secondary. For major traces, I personally recommend getting all of these. They're all useful. For relic sets, she's actually a pretty simple character to build. You're going to be getting the quantum set, but with an effect hit rate body. After you have that, you want speed boots. In this instance, you can go for attack, or you can go for defense and HP if you really need it. Her main purpose at E0 and E1 is to add that weakness. Energy regen rope, or attack percentage if you have E1. You can subsequently also go for something like break effect. Now, break effect does depend on obviously her breaking the enemy, but if you have a good piece lying around, you can honestly get it. I'd recommend in some instances go for Pan-Galactic if you actually need the 10% effect hit rate. If you don't, you have other options. For most of you at E0 or E1, this is what your FU will be looking like with as much effect hit rate as you can muster. In this instance, this FU is running Pinakuni Land of Dreams. You can rely on effect hit rate and subsets. Just keep in mind that you will be swapping these out if you go for E2 and beyond because she's going to be running a more DPS oriented build. For significant Eidolons, E1 gives her energy, and this is why we're going and mixing Eidolons with the light cone section. E1 gives her energy for every debuff. This is why you can actually afford to alleviate the strain on before the tutorial mission starts because the 8 energy is nice, but primarily, let's be honest here, you're just using it for the effect resistance, effect hit rate. You're just using it for the effect hit rate in this instance. And so you can afford to go for something like Welt's Light Cone because you're getting additional damage. And then her signature has lower effect hit rate, but if you're going for a signature, you likely have E2, and at that point, a case can be made that it's better to just have this. Incessant Rain is incredibly good. Now, before any of you ask, we're going to go over two things. First off, what if you don't have her tutorial or free-to-play option? And second off, is Acheron's a good value for her? First off, on the Acheron point, no. All of these are additional damage bonuses. The more Eidolons you get on enemy, the less value these hold. But 32% crit damage or 36% crit damage, it doesn't really matter, isn't too valuable for enemy because you're losing out on 24 effect hit rate. So in this instance, they're about the same in terms of what you're trading off. I'd say go for Incessant Rain, increases your team damage with the Aether Code. Now, what if you don't have before the tutorial mission starts? You're missing out on the 8 additional energy and the 40 effect hit rate. Then I would say you should probably go for just Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat. Understanding the fact that her signature light cone, or more specifically her free-to-play option, is extremely good, means that if you don't have it, you aren't getting the same bonuses anywhere else. Yes, this gives you the 40 effect hit rate, but you're not increasing DOT damage because you are not placing a damage over time on her. You're not using Wind Shear, you're not using Bleed, you're not using Burn or anything else. So you're only getting the 40 effect hit rate. Well, its light cone is a 5-star and it's good, but honestly, you might not have it. And so Resolution Shines gives you a good chance to just apply an additional def down debuff. And I honestly think it's worthwhile to go for. Just gonna have to go really hard on substats. And so it's tied. If you want to use Eyes of the Prey, go ahead. You're just not gonna benefit from the second passive, and you can still go for the same build we discussed earlier, or you can go for Resolution Shines. Just keep in mind you aren't getting a 40 effect hit rate bonus. Now, with all of that being said, what about Eidolons? E1 means you can go with an attack percentage rope, or you can go for energy regen rope, just ult spam. It's not going to be worthwhile in my opinion though. Even though you can ult spam with SW and it may be very comfy, this lasts 3 turns. For the vast majority of you, if you have her E1 and you apply enough debuffs, you won't really need to refresh this too often. Now, an energy regen rope does make sense if you have her in a more DPS orientation, but I'd say that gets even better with Eidolons because E4 gives her increased ultimate damage. Speaking of which, once you get E4 and or E6, you can make a case for going for an attack percentage sphere. This is strictly because her E4 increases her quantum damage by a basis of her attack equal to 5 times, which can be 100% quantum damage bonus. This does mean that you can go for whichever one has better substats, just keep in mind you can't oversaturate, obviously. Is she still good? Yes, she provides the highest defense down reduction in the game. It works exceptionally well with characters like Acheron if your Acheron is E2. Just keep in mind, her single target orientation doesn't exactly lend itself well to boosting characters like QQ because QQ has AoE damage, meaning that she'll only be dealing increased damage to one enemy, not the entire team. In those instances, I can recommend somebody like Pella. But the ability to apply a weakness, specifically one for mono quantum teams, is great. It's also really good in Simulated Universe when you're facing off against an enemy and you want to break their weakness, but you can't rely on the buffs to give you that opportunity. Overall, she's a great character. I'd say if you don't want to go for mono quantum orientation or this full quantum set, you can go for 2-piece quantum and mix it with the speed set. You can also go for Pioneer of Dead Divers, because even though you aren't applying or aren't getting the additional def down bonus of quantum set, you are getting a bunch of crit because you're applying a bunch of debuffs. So Pioneer Waters set can actually be really good, especially if you're already farming it for Acheron. Either way, whether you love it for the thighs, the flatness, the ass, or everything in between, this Stinky Gamer is an exceptional character to get, and I actually can recommend you get Eidolons, at least, or at most, E2. Anything beyond that is just extra. She's a good character at E0 though. E2 just makes her way easier to build out. For all of you going for her in the future, I wish you the best of luck, and for all of you who already have her, tell me down below, how do you use her? She fits in pretty much any team. It's why the team building section isn't exactly too long. Either way, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.